Waterline repairs can be a costly mess, but what if there was a way to fix old water mains without tearing up streets and old trees? There actually is, and Chicago is dipping into the waters of this technology with a pilot program, although some suburbs and other cities have been doing it for years. Here to tap into the details are Andrea Putz, Deputy Commissioner of Water Supply for the Chicago Department of Water Management, Julie Vlock, board member of the East Andersonville Residents Council, and Jonathan Ballou, a reporter who's been writing about this for Block Club Chicago. Welcome, all of you. Jonathan Ballou, tell us why old trees have been casualties of water pipe replacements.
Well, as you know, Paris, throughout the city, there's water mains and there's sewer mains that conflict with each other, and there's old lead lines and all sorts of things. And the old method involves excavation, which oftentimes can conflict with trees and their root systems. So many times the city has to call the forestry department, and some of those trees have to come down.
And Julie Vlock, you've been active. This has really caught your concern. What's happened in your neighborhood with respect to trees coming down?
So far, we haven't had them come down because we got organized early in the year. The aldermen had a general meeting, so we knew what was coming. And then by March, we had learned that there were about a dozen or so mature, valuable trees in the crosshairs of the water department following the approach that they were advocating at the time. And we'd been led to believe that they had to take down these trees in order to comply with Illinois EPA regulations, which we began to question. And as a result, we said to people, there are so many benefits environmentally. It's environmental foolishness, Paris, to take down mature trees because of the benefits environmentally in terms of CO2 containment, capture, and absorption. CO2 is the primary cause of climate change.
Certainly people in neighborhoods grow fond of their tree-lined streets. Andrea Putz, what is this alternative method that would spare these trees?
Sure. We have two pilots that are about to be run. They're different pilots. One is looking at lining water mains. The other is looking at lining private drains. They're very different pipes. The water main is the large main that runs underneath, large pipe that runs underneath city streets and brings drinking water to the service lines to people's homes. The private drain is the small pipe that takes the wastewater from people's homes to the sewers. So in either case, those pipes do eventually come to the end of their useful life, usually about 100 years. So we're looking at this lining technology because it could extend the useful life about 50 years.
Oh, 50 years. So you're lining it with this resin-type substance as opposed to tearing the street up and getting rid of the pipe altogether. Jonathan Ballou, people have tried to do this in Chicago. It's been done in other places. Why has Chicago not adopted this before?
Well, I guess that would depend on who you ask. But during my reporting, some have said that sometimes Chicago has a tendency of a failure to embrace the new. But outside of that, I think that's more of a question for the water department. But in reality, there are other cities that have been using this since. Toronto's been using it since 2003, and that was when they started to pilot it, and now they're lining miles of it a year. And so they've been using it pretty successfully since 2008.
You know, a lot of Chicago's pipes are very old, 100 years old. Julie Vlock, are we sure that this is a safe method of upgrading pipes so that water will not be contaminated?
The Illinois EPA signed off on it in August. So that's good enough for us. The we were hoping that they would include this technology as valid approach, not only for the water mains, which has been demonstrated, as Jonathan said, in cities for over a decade, over 2 decades. And now it has been signed off on as an acceptable remedial problem with regard to the sewers, the private drains.
And so this will be private drains, not service lines that take water from the main to each property. Why not?
To be clear, that what we have in the city of Chicago is an older infrastructure. We have a more urban, dense infrastructure. So when we look at other cities like our suburbs where the water pipes tend to be younger, we have a little bit of a different scenario there. Also, when we look at places like Toronto, who has been using it, it took them many years to kind of tweak the process and get it right. They also have a little bit of different regulatory structure as well as sewer system. So those type of lining, it's going to look a little different in Chicago.
And what neighborhoods are going to have the pilot program?
That's going to be determined as part of the scope of the pilot. We'll see. We have subject matter experts coming on board to help us determine some of that.
Jonathan, when you were reporting on this, you did a walk along with Alderman Harry Osterman, who is your alderman, Julie, up in Edgewater, Andersonville. What did you discover on that?
Well, honestly, not a lot, Paris, on that. We just discovered that a lot of trees were coming down, and that was around, I believe, April. And then around June, we started getting tips at Block Club Chicago from people saying, hey, you need to check out CIPP, or cured in place pipe. So we started checking it out and digging in, and that's when our report came out in July.
Cured in place pipe, of course, is the technology that we're referring to. Are there certain neighborhoods in Chicago that are more affected than others in terms of trees needing to be cut down?
Well, it's an issue that affects every neighborhood, certainly. Edgewater has definitely been very affected. They lost a lot of trees recently. I know outside of trees, even in the second ward, Alderman Brian Hopkins has been lobbying it because he's got a very dense ward, and a lot of construction projects upset businesses and retail and homeowners, and so he's been lobbying since, I believe, last summer for CIPP in his ward.
Julie Vlock, I'd assume that you would lobby to have your neighborhood as part of this pilot program.
Oh, yes, and I'm assuming our alderman is, because we started promoting this among the community, and then it mushroomed from there. We advised people, as the alderman had said, he couldn't control it. It was the water department that makes the decisions, and the water department had led us to believe that Illinois EPA was a factor. So we, as a community, approached all of those decision makers. We approached the commissioner of the water department, we approached the forestry deputy commissioner, and we approached the director of Illinois EPA.
And in the past, other officials had said that they weren't sure that that water would be safe after using this method. So why did Mayor Lightfoot want to sort of take another look at this?
Well, we had done this in 2017 with a pilot and had some concerns about how it resulted. But of course, Mayor Lightfoot and the Department of Water Management, we are leaders in water technology and research, and we want to make data-driven decisions. So if there's a way that we can increase our the tools in our toolbox by using this new technology, then we definitely want to embrace it.
What were the concerns?
A lot of it with regard to regulation and complicated underground infrastructure. But in the end, I'm a PhD environmental engineer. I'm an environmentalist. I love trees more than a lot of people. But water quality has to be at the forefront. My kids drink this water, our communities drink this water. I have to make sure that any technology we embrace doesn't impact the water quality.
Jonathan Ballou, in the suburbs and other cities that do this, do they, in lieu of replacing service lines, main lines, do they use this CIPP technology?
I believe so.
For their service lines,
For their service lines, but one thing to note about the pilot as well is that the contractors believed it was too small of a pilot, and so that it wasn't really intended to succeed necessarily. And
This was the pilot they did in
pilot
2017?
in Chicago.
In 2017?
Yes, in the 10th ward. But that line is still used today, and from my reporting, actually found that the chlorine levels went up and some of the contaminants went down.
So the water was actually safer.
The water was safer than before.
To clarify, we did have to dig up the pilot afterwards because it was unsuccessful. So what's in there now is actually not CIPP.
Julie Vlock, do you think that with debate now over replacing lead service lines, that this should be used as an alternative to actually dig up the lines and replace them?
I think it's something the city should pursue, and I'm very glad that the water department is looking into it. And for our particular situation, we're very glad that they're also considering it, as Andrea said, with regard to sewers, because that's where our trees ended up in the crosshairs, was the conflict
And to clarify, right,
from
now you're
the sewers.
considering it with sewer lines and main lines, but not water service lines.
With
Both.
private drains, just to be clear.
Private
Yeah.
drains.
The sewers, actually, we already do CIPP.
And to be clear, CIPP shouldn't be considered as a cure-all solution. A lot of municipalities describe it to me as a tool in your toolbox to use when there are conflicts, an old cobblestone road at a church, or trees, or anything that may be invasive with traditional methods. It's worth taking a look at CIPP, is what many of my sources told me.
And you, Jonathan, you write at Block Club. Is this the kind of story that sort of illustrates the importance of kind of the hyper-local journalism that you all do over there?
Absolutely. I think it's a great example because I was following a story just about trees, and I was talking with Julie and other neighbors, and I wouldn't have been able to do this more in-depth reporting had it not been for the being in the neighborhoods every day and understanding what was going on.
Nice work, nice work. All of you sharing your views on Chicago tonight. Andrea Putz, Julie Vlock, and Jonathan Ballou, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A shipping container is finding new use in a West Side neighborhood as a pop-up museum.